Hello, and welcome to Black Girl Joy, where we spark conversation and inspire your thinking. My name is Nicole A, and I am your host. Welcome. Hi, Nicole.
Hey,
How are you?
I am doing okay right now. Still a little tender from my bone marrow biopsy that I just had yesterday. So just dealing with the tenderness and discomfort that all of that joy brings. How are you, my love?
I am good. But I wanted to thank you for coming. Thank you for accepting my request to talk about a disease that I knew about, but I didn't know very much about. Multiple myeloma is a
Hmm.
something that really is a dis-ease, like my pastor likes to say, that it disrupts the
Yes.
body. And I wanted you to basically give your testimony about it, and from beginning to end, make giving insight to a world that some of us are very pretty much not aware of. Sometimes we don't
Hmm.
know what to ask when we go to the doctor. We don't know what we should do when we're having symptoms, or if things are occurring and we just brush it off and think of it as nothing. I would like for you, as to the place of where you're comfortable, to give us an insight from when you were diagnosed with multiple myeloma till where you are today, if that's okay.
Okay. Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. Um, so multiple myeloma is a rare blood cancer. Um, and basically how I like to describe it to help people kind of get an understanding of it is bone cancer and leukemia had a baby, and the baby is called multiple myeloma. So
Mm,
it affects your plasma cells. Um, in your bone marrow.
mm-hmm,
And then what that does, it starts producing these proteins called M proteins. And with M proteins, they target and affect your bones. So they basically they're tumors,
mm-hmm,
but when you look on x-rays, it looks like you have holes in your bones. And so those holes are actually called lytic disease. It impairs your immune function, it causes anemia, you can have excessive bleeding, and it makes it hard to fight infection. Now, with the damage that you get because of the lytic disease,
mm-hmm.
so your bones are weakened, so you're more susceptible to osteoporosis. You're more likely in a higher risk of getting fractures. So just the smallest thing can a fracture in your bone and you don't even realize it. You can pick up a really heavy bag off your table and don't realize it's heavy. Weight of it pulling your shoulder down, that action alone for some people is nothing. You might feel a little sore. For
Mm-hmm.
someone with multiple myeloma, it actually can cause a fracture in your shoulder or cause a fracture
Dislocated.
in your arm. So
Oh,
you
wow.
have to be really, really careful.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that you do notice with um, these bone disease, they say that you have higher levels of calcium in your blood. So
Mm-hmm.
taking calcium is not really healthy for someone with multiple myeloma.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I do want to stress that's really important, it's it's a it's a cancer. Again, it's rare, but it is more common in our community than
Mm.
any other community.
I
So
didn't know
yes,
that.
yeah. So even though, and I had to look up the numbers, the American Cancer Society says there's like about 35,000 plus cases, about 19,000 800 in men, and about 15,800 in women. But it's more of us in our community than any other community out there. So both, all races can get it, but we get it higher.
We're more prone
And
to it then.
yeah, we are. And so it's not a hereditary disease. Yeah, you possibly can get it hereditary, but it's
Hmm.
really more of an environmental disease. And they don't know how, but they just know that it somehow comes from the environment. Um, One thing that is about multiple myeloma in our community is that because it's, even though it's higher in our community, it's a cancer that is not treated the same way. So we do not get the kind of care that is needed in order for us to survive, even
Hmm.
though when we do get it, we have the same rate of survival as anybody else. But there's racism, systemic racism in healthcare. We
Hmm.
are less likely to get the treatments that we need. Like there is a combination of chemo called Revlimid and Valcade, and that's like the first line of defense. And sometimes, our in our community, that's not something that's offered. Stem
Hmm.
cell transplants is something that, it's not offered as well, even though it's shown that in the beginning you can have a longer lifespan with it, and it basically keeps the myeloma coming back again. It keeps it coming back for a while. And again, I want to stress, they say there's no cure for it. You can go into remission, but at some point or another, it will come back. And it has nothing to do with what you're doing. That is just the way it is. That's the nature of this beast. Um, but it's a livable condition. You can live, up to 20. They have reports of people living 20 years and beyond with it. And so it's not like you get it today and you die.
Right.
It's just really being able to advocate for yourself, being able to go to get testing. So some of the symptoms, to help your listeners understand, so that way you know whether or not this is something you're dealing with, is pain in your back, pain in your arm, pain in your all over, just over body pain. That is the first joint. And it's not just, oh, this hurts, or I'm talking about bone pain that no matter how much you might put a massager on your body or on a specific spot, it doesn't go away. You can put heating pads, you can get a massage, but the pain is in the bone. And so it's not in your joints, it's in your bone. That's your first sign. If you have blood tests taken and your blood results come back and you see uh, red, your hemoglobin is really low, that's a sign as well. So something that you should be cognizant of, and
Hmm.
kind of advocate for yourself and say, hey, can you do a little bit more research on that? Why is my blood work low? And if you're having pain, stress to your doctor, hey, you know what, I've been having these overall bone pains. Can we do some tests and look look and see what's going on the inside, even though my blood work might not be showing it?
Hmm.
And just really fighting for yourself and making sure that you get those tests that's needed. There are so many exams that can help
Hmm.
determine multiple myeloma, from PET scans to MRIs to CAT scans to, like I said, bone marrow biopsies. They do urine testing. They do renal testing to see if you're going into renal failure, and a slew of blood tests that actually will show doctors on paper what's happening in your blood work. And all of those things can actually help save your life. And once you have your answer, once you get that diagnosis, it's not the end of the world. It's just, okay, the next step is fight for the treatment that you need to be able to survive and live. Because if you don't know what's available, then you run the risk of end up dying an early death because you're not aware of what can be done.
Mm.
There's so many clinical trials that are out there,
Right.
and if you don't inform yourself or keep yourself up to date, you will miss out on treatments that can actually help you. I like to tell your listeners there are foundations out there that focus on multiple myeloma, especially the Multiple Myeloma Foundation, the American Cancer Society, LLS.org. These are really good organizations that help educate you as to what's happening and what's going on in this particular disease. And it really can save your life. And I'm grateful for the care team that I have down here in Georgia. And I'll tell anybody, if it weren't for them, I would be dead. I
Mm.
would not have survived out of my first 6 months. I really wouldn't be here. I would be dead. But God saw fit to give me the best care team. And I'm so grateful for the hand and the providence of God on my life to be able to direct me to where I needed to go. So I'll get into my testimony.
Mm-hmm.
um in 2015, I was, well, before 2015, I was dealing with a lot of fibroids and a
Mm.
lot of bleeding, and it was on and off. And about fibroids, it's not a fun
Yeah.
thing to have.
Exactly.
Right. So
Trees growing
right,
inside.
exactly. So you fluctuate every month, and that's not the problem. But when we got down here in 2015, I noticed that it had picked up a little bit more, and it started becoming heavier and heavier and heavier.
Mm-hmm.
And unbeknownst to me, um this was really kind of a start to my medical journey.
Mm-hmm.
And in May of that year, I ended up in a car accident.
Mm.
And the car accident, had I gone to the hospital, I really believe, had I gone to the hospital when I should have, instead of
Mm-hmm.
just dropping my kids to school and then rushing back to work, um, those things that I mentioned before would have been caught, and I could have caught it earlier. But that's neither here nor there. um, After the car accident and still dealing with fibroids, I just started realizing that I started having a lot of pain in my body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my collarbone would hurt anytime I laughed. It would always make this clicking sound. It was hard to sneeze. It was hard to take a deep breath. So I was dealing with, at the time, I didn't know, a lot of fractures. My collarbone was fractured. I had 3 fractured ribs on both sides. And I told anybody that, you know what, if 2 people were to pull me on both sides of my body, I would literally split down the middle. That's how much pain I was in. I could not raise my arm to even put my shower cap on my head. I was walking with a limp on my right side, and everybody was noticing like what's going on. And I would just say like, I just, I just don't feel good.
Mhm.
Um, we thought it was just the bleeding, but it wasn't really the bleeding. The bleeding was, it added to the problem,
Mhm.
but it was really my body showing the signs of that I had this disease going on and not being aware. That's why I stress to your listeners, listen to your body when you have pain, bone pain, not just pain, but bone pain. Those are signals that you should go get yourself checked out, and don't be afraid. Go to the doctor, get yourself checked out.
Mhm.
And everything came to a head in August for from I started bleeding really heavily from the middle of August all the way up until nonstop up until the to October 25th. And I was going through in about 1 hour about 6 pads. And I went to the hospital during that time, and I would, they would, okay, here's some blood, and then they would send me back out. And
So
October 20
they gave you blood transfusions.
fusion, yeah. So I
Wow.
would get like a unit or two, and then okay, they would let me go. But October 25th, 2015, it was the worst day. By that time, I hadn't had any blood transfusion, and I was so weak and so tired, and I couldn't understand, you know, what I needed to do to get over. I was taking iron pills, and that wasn't helping. I was taking vitamin B12, and that wasn't helping. I was taking folic acid. I was taking all of these vitamins, and nothing was helping get
Mhm.
this feeling of just exhaustion and fatigue off of me. And I took my kids to school, and almost got into another head-on collision because I just started drifting to sleep, falling and going into the wrong lane. And if it
Mhm.
wasn't for this truck and God waking me up, I
Mhm.
wouldn't be here. And went to work that day, and it is again but the grace of God that I was able to get through the day, pick my kids up from school, and came home.
Because we're
And that,
moms. That's what we do. We're
right,
moms.
we
Push through.
exactly, we pushed through,
And sometimes you
and
didn't.
to our detriment,
Yes.
exactly.
Mhm.
And my daughter was like, "Why don't you stay home and rest?" I was like, "Oh no, sweetheart, you got school. You guys got to go to school. You guys, oh no, you're not missing school because I don't feel well. I'm not doing that to you guys." And
Mhm.
so when I finally got home, all I could do, I had enough strength to eat a small piece of chicken and just changed my pads and lay down. And I laid down that night. I didn't do anything with my family, didn't even get ready for work. I just had it in my mind, you know what? I'm not going to work the next day. We'll figure out how to get the kids to school. Maybe I can ask somebody to take them to school for me, whatever the case might be. I just really need to rest. And that night I laid in bed, and 11:30 I woke up with this feeling of dread, and I knew in myself something wasn't right. I
Mhm.
wasn't doing good, and I could feel my body shutting down. I was cold in all of my extremities, like my hands were cold, my feet
Mhm.
was cold, my heart was pounding, and I felt it. I really felt it. I felt like my life was slowly slipping away, and I was like, something's not right. And I closed my eyes and I was like, Lord, I don't know what's going on. What do you want me to do? And I could hear him say, you need to go to the hospital. And he stressed it to me really, really well. And I, like a fool, laid in this bed and said, Father, don't feel,
I'm
I don't
not
feel
moving.
going to no hospital.
That's what we do.
That's what we do, right? Stubborn. But he stressed it again, go to the hospital. And it was more of a command than a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay. And I tapped my husband and I said, babe, I don't feel good. Something's not right. I think I needed to go to the hospital. And he said, you sure? And I said, yeah. And as soon as I tried to sit up, I fell back and passed out. And I so grateful that I fell back in the bed. I didn't hit my head or anything, but I just laid back down. My head did this swoop and I just passed out, and I could hear the activities of everybody running and rushing and people trying, them trying to wake me up and everything. And in the moment of going into unconsciousness and trying to stay conscious, I clearly heard the voice of God say, not yet.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounded like thunder. It sounded like a crack in the earth. I don't know how else to describe it, but it snapped me back awake. And they got the ambulance in as quick as possible. And they were like, okay, can you walk to the living room, because there's no other way for us to get you out of your room. And they had to carry me because I could not stand for nothing. When I got into the ambulance, they took my vitals, which was amazing. My blood pressure was normal. My heart rate was normal. My oxygen was normal. So everything was normal on
Mm-hmm.
paper. When I got in the hospital and they did the blood count, my blood count was a 4.0.
Ooh.
And yes, and with that, I was still, so this speaks to how God works in our lives. And when he declares and decrees a thing, he means what he says and says what he means. He
Mm-hmm.
told me not yet, and he meant not yet. My time
Mm-hmm.
had not come, and it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't time for me to go. And with that, I was cognizant of everything that was happening around me. I was awake. I knew what they were talking about. I could answer questions. I just couldn't move, without my head wanting to hit the floor or something. And the nurse in the room, she was like, your blood count is a 4.0. How are you even awake? And she said, yeah, with as low as it is, you're either unconscious, you're in a coma, or basically you're dying or dead. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't understand how you're even functioning the way you are, and you're bleeding the way you are. And all I could say is, but God. That's all I said. I couldn't say anything else because there was nothing else for me to say. And they admitted me, and I ended up staying there for a week and a half and had over 12 units of blood.
Mm-hmm.
And they finally got me up to a 7.6. And at that point, they discharged me and were like, well, you're too, your blood count is way too low for any kind of procedure to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we put you on a table, you will bleed to death.
Right.
So all we can do is basically fill you up with blood and hope somehow, you stay alive. But
Wow.
the right, exactly.
Wow.
So the problem was not only was I physically bleeding outside, I was dealing with blood loss inside.
Inside, right. Internal blood from losing all of that. Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. So the myeloma was sucking life out of me as well as these fibroids. And I didn't know, and no one else knew. But you know what? God had it in his plan how to save my life. My sister-in-law um, said she got real upset that they discharged me and didn't take care of my fibroids. She's like, okay, well, here's what I want you to do. I need you to come to Emory. That is the name of the hospital that I'm in, that I go to.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to take care of you and you this, that, the other. And I was like, okay, but I have no reason to call the ambulance because at this moment I'm pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how to get to Emory into the system in order for them to help me with this bleeding problem.
Mm-hmm.
Literally a week after that conversation, I'm still home and I have plans to go back to work the following week. My husband says to me, and I was grateful, and I failed to mention my parents are here in Panama, so they're visiting at this time. And my husband calls me during one of the days that I'm home, and he goes, "Hey, you want to see?" He said, "Do you want to see a movie?" I heard, "Do you want to go to the movies?"
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, sure. Be great to get dressed, to get, to just a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
change of pace,
Yeah.
just to spend time with him.
Right.
Somebody is picking the kids up for me. So I'm not worried about having to go pick them up. Why not go out and spend some time with my husband? He says he's coming off work. Let me go get ready. And
Mm-hmm.
I got up and I took a shower and I lifted now remember, I'm dealing with all of these bone pains still. Even though I'm excited about going out, I'm still in physical pain. And
Mm-hmm.
my right hip is my hip that was the one that was on my lower part of my body, the really damaged, really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I lift my foot to wash the bottom of my foot and pop. I dislocated my hip and I went straight down. Now,
Mm.
again,
Jeez
I speak
Louise.
I speak to the providence of God because with that, I could have fell forward. I could have fell out of the tub and hit my head on the toilet. I could have fell backward. I could have felt any kind of way and really hurt or injured myself, hurt my head or some kind of way, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't. I fell straight to my knee. It was like I fell in prayer
Mm-hmm.
and I let out this sharp and scream, and my mom comes, and I was so glad that they were there because had this happened by myself, again, the providence of God, this could have happened with no one home.
Right.
How would have I been able to get out of the tub, cover myself for the paramedics to come and
Right.
get me?
Right.
But God, again, God is so faithful that He takes care of the finite detail and He is not surprised by anything we go through. He's not shocked by what we face in our lives. He's not confused about our circumstances and situations. He
Mm-hmm.
puts into place those things that need to be in order for when we come against those or we walk into those situations. He's like, I got it all worked out. My
Right.
parents were here. How uncanny. I fell straight down and they were, my mom was able to help me get out the tub and help me get dressed. And my dad called the ambulance and um they got my stuff together so that I could go to the hospital. And, they had to carry me out again. So this is like the second time again I'm headed to the hospital in literally 2.5 weeks.
Mm.
And we get to the hospital, I get to the hospital, and Scott races to the hospital. And they're like, okay, we're going to do some tests. And they did blood work and x-rays and this and that, the other. And they came back, I think, 4.5 hours later with all these tests that I took. And they're like, well, we see something, so we're going to admit you and we're going to run some more tests.
Mm.
And we all looked at each other. My dad was there, my husband and we all looked at each other. And I said, no one say it. Nobody say it. I'm not accepting that. That is not going to be the answer. It's going to be something else, but we're not going to say that. That's not what it is. And 3 days worth of exams, and I was prodded, um, had a bone marrow biopsy, uh, localized. I wish I had known they could put me under, but they did it while I was awake. The most excruciating pain outside of giving childbirth that I could ever explain. And when that November 13th was when I went in, and November 17th is when they came back with my diagnosis. And they were like, well, it is cancer. It's called multiple myeloma. It's rare blood disease. It's a rare blood cancer, I mean. It is incurable, but it's treatable. And you might never walk again because of the way your bones look. You will never walk again for the rest of your life. And I didn't hear anything after that.
Don't you
I
love
didn't
how they always want to interject what you might never do?
do,
But
yes,
as always, God has a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, and
exactly.
a sixth plan of
Mm-hmm.
what can be done and will be done. Isn't it
Is
amazing?
It's so amazing. It really is. And I just looked at, and I will not forget this doctor. His name was Dr. McLemore. Why do I
Mhm.
remember him? But I remember him. And he went on and he talked and he talked and he talked. And like I said, I don't remember anything he said after
Mhm.
that whole paragraph. I always ask my husband what he said, and he tells me, yeah, they talked about the bleeding and talked about some other stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. And I laid there, and I didn't cry at that moment. I just laid there absolutely stunned. I was stunned and I was numb. And I laid there going like, multiple myeloma. What the heck? Can I tell people, do not Google your diseases.
Oh my goodness. You, my sister, and a few that I know. You guys and your Google.
Don't do that.
Mhm.
Because with Google, you die the next day. I did the worst thing I could ever do. I Googled this thing, and according to Google, I was supposed to die in 5 years. But look at me, I'm going on year 7. Praise God.
Amen.
And again, God's healing uh, power, God's healing, His Spirit, His word to me of not yet. And I just remember that whole week being in the hospital, and God put in my room and in my life these nurses, all of these nurses. I tell you, God loves us more than we can ever comprehend. That even in our worst moments, when we can't pray for ourselves, He brings people into our lives that will pray for us. And with us, I had this elderly lady. She had to be in her 60s, and she treated me as if I was her granddaughter. She washed me up and cleaned me up, and she would come in every morning, encourage me and change me. And it was such a change and a dramatic experience, from what the doctors were talking about, and from when they would come into my room, and from when they would talk about, here's what we're dealing with, and here's what we're trying to figure out. And they were trying to figure out, how do we save your life, and how do we stop the bleeding, because the bleeding was the problem. Do we focus on the cancer, or do we focus on the bleeding? If we focus on the bleeding, you might die with the cancer. But if we focus on the cancer, you might die with the bleeding. How
Hmm.
do we focus? So that was their quagmire. And they spent literally 4 days in my hospital stay trying to debate what to do with me. And meantime, during that time, I'm getting blood transfusion, um, PTs coming in and trying to get me out of the bed to walk. It's so painful. It hurts like I can't explain. And I had these nurses coming in, and one nurse came in particular, and she said, "I see you're always on." And she uh she came in after Bible study, because I
Mm-hmm.
called in to our Bible study. And no, I'm sorry, I'm lying. Forgive me. No, I did. Yeah, my daughter would call me, so I could hear Bible study. And
Mm-hmm.
after Bible study, she came in my room. She said, "What are you always listening to in the evening?" I said, "Oh, it's my Bible study." She said, "Oh, okay. Can I tell you something?" And she proceeded to speak into my life. She proceeded to talk about how God was going to raise me out of a bed of affliction. She proceeded to talk life into me. And when she finished, she prayed this prayer. And I was like, "Don't ever have to worry about me telling your doctors anything." She said, "I don't care about them. I'm going to pray for my patients, especially if I
Mm-hmm.
know they need it." And
Right.
she prayed such a prayer that when she walked out the room, all I could do was turn my face and, like Hezekiah, cry. I cried. That was the first time after that diagnosis that I could cry. And I cried. I cried this cleansing cry, not this heartbreaking, angry cry, but this cleansing cry. And I read that story about Hezekiah, who turns his face to the wall and he cries out to God and says, "Look, I lived my life for you. And if I die, who's going to praise you? You know what? I what can I do?" And in Isaiah goes back, God tells Isaiah, "Go back to him and tell him, I've heard your prayer and I'm going to heal you." And that like resonated so loudly in my spirit. And I said, "Okay, God, I hear you." And from that moment on, I it was like the light bulb went on in my brain. Like, you know what? I shall live and not die, and declare the works of the Lord. And I started this change of, I'm going to get out of this bed. I don't care how much it hurts. I don't care how much pain I'm in. When PT comes, I'm going to walk as far as I can push myself mentally past this pain. I'm going to walk. And I started doing that. They would give me some drugs, 30 minutes, some pain meds, 30 minutes before, so that way I could be able to walk through the pain without being too much in pain. And I did that. I really made it in my mind. I'm walking. I'm not that Dr. McLemore is a liar. The devil is a liar. I am going to walk. I'm not going to uh, stay in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. And the night that I got discharged, I remember the day that I got discharged, the nurse that discharged me, she said, I want you to promise me something. I want you to not take what they say. I don't want you to listen to their words. They're just practicing medicine. And then she proceeded to tell me the story about a young man who had the same thing. He dislocated his hip and took the words of the doctor about never walking again. And she said to this day, he's still in a wheelchair. She's like, you don't have to be in a wheelchair. You can walk if you want to. And I think God wants you to walk. And I took that as like, wow, God, you're mindful of where I am mentally and physically, that you would put somebody who doesn't know me. She only saw me like that that night before. She not the night before, the day before. So she doesn't, she's the discharge nurse. She doesn't know me, but she took the time to tell me that. And I went home, and for maybe 3 weeks, I stayed in a wheelchair in the house and was in the bed and I made sure that I followed my physical therapist's recommendation of getting up and walking as much as possible. We had a walker, and I after 3 weeks, I made it in my mind, I'm not going to do this wheelchair. I can't maneuver around in the wheelchair anymore. We're going to start walking. And got out of the bed and started walking with the walker daily. And it was uncomfortable. I had to relearn how to walk, and not the easiest thing. So anybody who understands what it feels like to have to learn how to walk again, it's not easy. And every time I would go to treatment, so treatment began in January. So they were like, okay, we're going to do treatment. We're not going to treat the bleeding. We're going to do treatment. And hopefully with the treatment will stop the bleeding. And in January of 2016, I began treatment. And as my stepmom would take me to and from treatment, she stayed with us because my husband had to go out of town for a month and a half for his job. She stayed with us to take care of me, and I'm so grateful for her for all that she did for us as a family. She would cook, she cleaned, took the kids to school, picked them up, you know, and thought nothing of it. And took such great care of me, took me to and from treatment. And I remember her sitting with me in the infusion center one day, and I saw this elderly lady, and she had to be in her mid 70s, and she was with a friend. And I heard the nurse say to her clearly, I see you. You moved from the wheelchair to the walker. She said, that's right. And in a few weeks, I'm not going to be on this walker anymore. And I looked at her and I looked at my mom and I said, that's going to be me. That is exactly what I'm going to be saying. These people are going to watch my progression from out of this wheelchair to a walker. And in a few weeks later, that's exactly what happened. Like not a few weeks, I would say like a few months later, we moved from the walker, we moved from the wheelchair to the walker. I saw that same lady, and she was walking with a cane, and she said, oh, the nurse said, I see you, you're walking with your cane. She said, in a few weeks, I won't be even needing this cane anymore. And I looked at my mom, and my mom looked at me, and we both said, that's going to be me. And I knew that I knew that I knew that that's what I wanted. And all of that need to gain my independence really came from a fact that somebody in my church was having a wedding, and I wanted to go to her wedding with a cane and not on a walker. I wanted to be able to wear some kitten high heels, um, and be able to walk.
You still
Yeah,
want her to be cute.
exactly. I wanted to be cute. I didn't want to be in my flats. I wanted to be in some high heels, some even if they were low high heels. I wanted to be cute going to this reception. Because
Mhm,
why? Because I could see God moving and healing me stage by stage by stage by
mhm,
stage. And we went through, you know, chemo for 6 months, and then I did the process of collecting stem cells, and then went back on chemo again. And by the time her wedding came, I was walking
And
with a cane, and I really didn't need it.
mm-hmm.
Every Everybody was like, "No, you're going you gonna wear some heels. You gonna walk with a cane." I was like, "Dang it! All right." But hey, I defied the doctor's prognosis of never walking again, never running again, never dancing again. I defied those prognoses of what came out of his mouth on November 17th, 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And I danced at her wedding. That was my promise to myself. I'm dancing one dance on a cane at her wedding. I don't care. And I danced.
Mm-hmm.
And, everybody was like, look at, wow, look, you know, they were, but no, there was no need to be surprised. I allowed God to work his faith and his power through me. I just
Mm-hmm.
walked in faith and on his word. I fed my spirit constantly his word, his scriptures. I fed my mind every day listening to testimonies of people being healed and saying, "Well, Lord, if you can do it for that person, you can do it for me."
Mm-hmm.
And just holding on to stories of different people with different types of ailments, you know, being healed, taking holy communion daily, and just doing those things, those small things. Now, does God always heal in that kind of? No, sometimes God, unfortunately, I've watched people pass away, who we've prayed for healing, and um God didn't heal them physically, but he healed them in a way that they needed to be healed. He brought them home. So they're whole and they're healthy and they're in the presence of God. So I don't say that God is doesn't heal. He's in the healing business, but he heals according to his providence and according to his way, according to his will and his purpose.
Mm-hmm.
What he has for your life is what he has for your life, and how he chooses to shine his healing power through you, that's what he's going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, uh, I went through this whole process, and they took me off, got on maintenance, and then I re-injured my right shoulder again. And then they found that there was disease on the shoulder, and we're going to do radiation on the shoulder. And not only are we going to do radiation on the shoulder, we're going to give you a stem cell transplant. And that's something that saves lives. It really is an important step in treatment that I can't stress more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through the process and almost died again, because what happens when you do a stem cell transplant is they literally wipe your entire white blood count. They give you this extremely high dose of chemo that, um unless you get, when if you don't get back your your blood count and your blood cells and your blood back the next day, you will die, because it
Mhm.
like cleans your whole slate. It like basically good cells, bad cells, every cell is dead. And
Mhm.
so you start off zero. You're at zero when you get this.
Like a new,
And like a new baby.
yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. So you become, you're a high risk factor for infection. And
Mhm.
anybody coming into your room, they have to, like we saw through COVID, they have to wrap themselves up. And it just so happens this particular person walked in my room, no covering, no nothing. And I got sick because of him. And I got this pneumonia. I got RSV, which is a
Ooh,
respiratory infection, right? And we've heard how it's been rampant this flu season.
right. Right.
And for a normal person, RSV is, it's an respiratory infection. It's having pneumonia, and after a few days or after a week or two, you get cleared and you move on. It's not as dire as COVID, but it's COVID's little sister.
Mhm.
And to a normal person, it's no big deal. But to me, that was life and death. And I ended up on a ventilator for a day. They said I heard I was supposed to be on a ventilator for an unknowable amount of time, because my lungs were filling up and I was having total respiratory failure.
You were
And
struggling to
so,
breathe.
yeah, I was struggling to breathe,
Mhm.
and they didn't know how long I was going to be. But I cannot stop talking about the goodness of God. I went on one day, and then the next day they took me off, and they were surprised. They were shocked. Now, mind you, I was hard headed. My um, cousin had passed away going on a ventilator, and I was afraid. I
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
afraid. I didn't want that to happen to me. And so
Right.
my pastors came and they prayed over me, and I was scared.
Of
I'm
course.
not going to lie, you
Mhm.
know. And they prayed over me, and even with their prayer and everything, I still had doubt. I still had fear. So it is okay to be, you can't be a super Christian. There's no such thing as a super Christian. Fear is human.
Yeah,
That's
those are real
human.
emotions. Those are real
Ex-
human emotions.
exactly, exactly. And I agreed to getting on the ventilator, and within a day they took me off because God. And that's all I can say about that. I don't understand. I don't know what happened. I don't remember all of what took place, that the 2.5 weeks that I was in ICU. I really don't know.
Mhm.
Um, when going in for the transplant, you're only supposed to be there for maybe the most 2 weeks. I was in the hospital for a whole month
Mhm.
and did not get out until the day before New Year's Eve.
Mhm.
And they they were like, "We don't know how you did it. We don't know how you survived, but there's nothing we can explain to you what made you come out and get over this as quickly as you did, because you have no white blood count, literally none, to help you fight this infection." And again, God. And I celebrated when I came home, and I was so weak. Once again, couldn't walk, just barely could, talk and everything. But I was alive. I was here. I was able to celebrate a new year with my family. And even though it was the hardest thing for them, I was here.
Mhm.
I was able to see my kids. So what? We didn't decorate the house. They had a tree, but God, I was here to celebrate with them.
Yeah, you were there
And
for that year, for the year.
yeah, I was. I was. My daughter crawled up in the bed and she was like, I said, "What do you want for Christmas?" She's like, "You."
Mm-hmm.
And she just broke down and started crying, and I just held her because she was there, like every, every chance she could be. This young lady who was still in school, um, still taking 7 classes, 7 hard classes, and had homework, would spend, would come on Friday or Thursday and spend the night and stay with me, and or come and stay and do homework in the room,
Mm-hmm.
and just be there with me. And I do remember there were vaguely like whispers of memory of her like feeding me water or something, and they would she would tell me, stories of how I would react in the room and everything. But this young lady stayed with me, um, to be a caregiver. My son would stay and come and visit, and it was harder on him. And but for the both of them, they were like, "You don't need anything for Christmas. We got you back."
Right.
And they were grateful. And so from 2016, 2017, 2018, I was in remission. And I decided to ask them what stage was I at, because that's the one good thing I think that helped me
Mm-hmm.
a lot, was never knowing what stage I was at. I didn't know. They
When you
never
first,
told me. So with multiple myeloma, unlike everything other cancers that have 4 stages,
Mm-hmm.
there's only 3 stages, and the third stage is the highest stage, and that's like stage 4. It's like you have stage 4.
Mm-hmm.
Some will rate like 3, 4. Some will say 3, 4. Some will say just 3, but the third stage is the highest stage you can have, and that's where I was. And
Of
my
course,
nurse,
best for
go
us.
ahead.
Yes.
Right, exactly. Exactly. God wanted to show up and show out.
exactly. I was just gonna say only the best for God to show His glory. Always.
Exactly. And my nurse practitioner, he said, Mrs. Anderson, we were all walking on eggshells. I'm like, what are you talking about on eggshells? He looked at me, he said, we didn't know if you were going to survive. So they had me at a 30% survival rate.
Mm.
30%.
And yet, in God's book, He had you at 100% survival.
Exactly. 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 And I looked at him and I just sat there and I was like, what? It's like, yeah, you were stage 3. Your blood, everything, your chromosomes are all mutated. So we didn't expect you to really survive beyond maybe 6 months.
Wow.
hmm But God, when God said not yet, he literally meant not yet. No bobards.
Amen.
Um,
So take us into your next stages, or when it does it, is it that it comes back, or how does that?
so it comes back, and for me, so with multiple myeloma, when we do blood work, they have these various tests called differential tests, and I won't get into the technicality of all of it. There
Mm-hmm.
are certain markers in our blood work that tells the doctor, yes, myeloma is still present in this person, and we need to either watch it or we need to revise. And so I'll give the technical name. There's your paraprotein, and there's your M spike. And like I said, your M spike is telling your calcium, and your paraprotein is something else. And then you have these other two tests that happens that says either there's inflammation going on or something's happening. We need to look a little bit deeper. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, on paper, I never show that I have myeloma.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always zero. Everybody has like me be 0.01%. I am like 0%. So I don't show anything. The only way for someone to know something is happening is I have to be in pain or injure myself for something to happen. So, my right shoulder and my left shoulder are my right shoulder and my right hip are my two trigger points. And I
Mm-hmm.
can tell when something is happening because if my right shoulder starts hurting me, and when I say hurting, I'm like, I can't raise it, it does something weird, then I'm going to complain because I don't complain. I know my body. I know what level of pain I can tolerate. And it's not to say that you should ignore pain. It's to say that with myeloma, there's a level of pain that you come to live with because you accept that that's just the nature of it. You're going to have bone pain regardless of what you do. That's just how it works. But there's also pain outside of your norm that you need to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have those things, you bring those things to your oncologist's attention. And then they'll decide, like, okay, maybe we need to do some imaging. So for me, because I don't show on paper what's happening on the inside, I have to have more imaging than necessary. So this time around, I I tore my rotator cuff because I was in a car accident again. I got T-boned by a driver trying to cut me off, and you know didn't didn't pay any mind to it. It's the same shoulder that was bothering me in the very beginning, and to my point, I did not listen. I don't want to say I wasn't listening to my body, but I was telling them. So they imaged it, they looked at it. There's nothing there. Okay, it's a torn rotator cuff. But even with that, you still have to be careful because again, the slightest tear, the slightest anything, that means there's a chance for myeloma to just perk up and say, "Hi, remember me."
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say January of this year, I experienced something I had never ever heard of called frozen shoulder. Never heard of it. Don't even know, never knew that it even exists. And basically, it literally means your whole shoulder, your arm locks in place. You can't do any, and it is painful. It's so painful. I don't wish this on my enemy's dead dog. It's exactly,
The dead
exactly
dog, right?
the
Okay.
dead
All right.
dog.
Just
Not
want to
even
make
my
sure.
enemy, just the dead dog. I don't even want my enemy to have this. It
Oh
is
my God.
not something I don't want anyone to ever experience.
Right.
And it locked up on me, and I thank God. And someone would say, "Why do you thank God for going through so much pain in your life?" Because if it's not, if if I don't, then what's my purpose?
Mm-hmm.
He gave me breath in my lungs. So I thank God for, I feel like how Paul says, I I glory in my weakness. I boast in my weakness, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even when he asked God to take away his thorn, and God said, "No, no, 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 no. It's in your weakness I'm going to be glorified." So I get that. God gets the glory in my weakness. I tell
Mm-hmm.
anybody it's always for his glory, but my benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So I could not move the shoulder. I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. I'm crying. If anybody knows anything about the pain meter, they say from 0 to 10, what's your pain level, 10 being the worst. I was at level 20. I was tearing and crying, and there was nothing, no one could touch me without me yelping or crying out in pain.
Mhm.
And went to the emergency room, and oh yeah, you have, torn rotator cuff, and it looks like you've got bone on bone, and we don't know what's going on, and we're going to have to send you for an MRI. And I couldn't get in for the MRI and had to wait a couple of days. So I went through the whole weekend in excruciating pain. And when I went to see the orthopedic, she she said, "Yeah, it's called frozen shoulder, and we're going to do an MRI on you." I said, "Okay." And a few days later, I had the MRI, and yeah, it looks like your myeloma came back. It's in the head of your shoulder as well in your collarbone. Oh, well, that wasn't there a few months ago. And when I say a few months ago, that wasn't, I had an MRI done in June of 2022. That wasn't there. They didn't see anything. Now it's there. And
Mhm.
so this is why I stress how important it is for us to listen to the keys of our bodies when we are feeling something that's not normal, and have it checked out. And I saw my oncologist, and she's like, "Yeah, we see that it looks like it's back, so let's go back on treatment again." And that's where I am right now. So this is my third journey. Um, um, the other two journeys, the first one was the beginning of it. The second one, it took 18 months because of the same shoulder. And um, we, I went through, and that was it. It When I say that was it was what it was. It wasn't like, oh my God, I'm going through it again. I made the best of it.
Mhm.
I didn't. I had my moments. I'm not going to say I was tough as nails. I had my moments. I'm human. I laid in bed and cried, and just had moments where I questioned and said, "Okay, Father, I know you kept me alive for a purpose and a reason, but what is it?
Mhm.
And what do you want me to do?" And frustration would come.
Mhm.
And in those moments, God would send somebody to call and be like, "What's going on? God put you on my heart." And they make me laugh. And
Mhm.
so faithfulness, just faithfulness, and watching him being mindful of the people he's placed in my life, like you. You're definitely you. I'm so grateful for you and your silliness. Your listeners, if they don't know you, oh my word, you are uh, the comedian that I need in my life on a constant. And I'm so grateful and thankful that we've had such a wonderful journey together, such a rich history together, from the beginning years of our kids being in twos and threes at our church, and
Mhm.
and just so grateful for our relationship. But I'm grateful for also the community that he's given me down here, the church
Mhm.
family that I have, because I've watched them come in droves and provide for us when they didn't have to, food and meal and God knows what else.
And it
And I'm
also
so,
shows God's faithfulness,
yes,
because it is a testimony. Like, a lot of times people think that if you're in the church, nothing happens to you, you don't go
right.
through anything, or
Hmm.
you know you've got this faith that's like a rock. And half of the time, 99% of the time, that's not true, because your faith is, I mean, biblically, even in the word, you question it, and
Hmm.
or it's questioned, you know
Yes,
because people at times are quick to say, oh, you don't have enough faith, or
exactly.
they want to measure it. But
Right.
truly, all of this and all that we through,
Mhm.
is a testimony to his word
Mhm.
and to who
Mhm.
he really is in our
Yes,
lives.
exactly.
Because I'm sure through the midst of this, there were bouts of depression
Oh yeah.
and all
Oh yes.
those things that come with the humanness of
Mhm.
living this experience and walking through this journey.
Yes. Oh
Um,
yes.
my pastor talks about, we are spiritual beings mastering the human experience, and it really
Oh,
is
that's
true.
good.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we are spirit and we worship God in spirit and in truth, and we are trying to master this body that he's given us, and
Right.
that we have been born into, grow into, and grow through journey,
Yeah. Yes.
um of however many years that he allots to us.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I mean, I told one girlfriend of mine's today, and she's going to give her testimony, but you guys are my sheroes, because although yes, I have a dis-ease myself, and I go through, I look to you and others and my community to also help me through, because
Mhm.
community really is everything.
Yes. Yes.
And my pastor's been teaching us and talking about that, and it's very true. Community, we think that community sometimes is, I don't know what people think community really is, but
Right.
yeah, that's a whole nother subject. But community really is those that God has sent for you, and
Mhm.
those that you are called to serve, because
Exactly.
we are servants,
Yes.
and we are called to serve, in
Mhm.
different
Mhm.
capacities, of course, but we are
Mhm.
called to serve.
Mhm.
And I'm thankful that have you've blessed me in allowing me to share your testimony, to share your story, to let people know that it is okay
It is.
to have that moment
Mhm. Mhm.
with God,
Mhm.
knowing that it hurts, knowing that, sometimes you're confused, or you don't know, or you have your strong will moments, because I'm that strong willed child, for those who don't know. My name is Nicole Celine. But but we have those moments where it's like, but as I talk to you, the one thing, and I wrote down so many notes, but the one thing that I drew from all of this is about the words that we speak to ourselves,
Yes.
and the things that we choose to believe in.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that makes a world of a difference,
Mhm.
because our words shape our world.
Yes.
And if you choose to um, use words that are not of God, or just not truth, and
Mhm.
because you want to believe, or you want to get into your feelings, quote unquote,
Mhm. Yes.
um, then you're going to shape a world that you may not want.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
if you want to shape a world that is of the positive and of what God is saying, then
Mhm.
you have to choose your words. And this is for me right now. You have to choose your words carefully as you speak about your condition
Yes.
and your situation, your
Exactly.
marriage, your
Mhm.
relationships.
Mhm.
You know, the word says, and it's a tattoo that I have, um, to speak life. I
Mm.
came to give you life,
Mhm.
and in,
Mhm.
death and oh, I'm stuck right now.
Life.
But death
Death
and
and
life are
life.
in the power of the tongue.
Yeah.
Choose life. Like, for him to even have to tell us to choose it,
Right.
it's a whole nother sermon that we won't have right now, but
Right.
it is the truth. And a lot of times I feel that we don't practice that. I find that cancer is an ugly, ugly, ugly dis-ease.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
in and it doesn't always have to be bodily. It could
Right.
also be mentally,
Yeah.
physically, emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something that needs to be treated and
Mm-hmm.
eradicated.
Mm-hmm.
And I thank you truly, you know, because you've opened my eyes to so many other things aside from multiple myeloma, and
Yeah.
my desire for Black Girl Joy is that people will take away from this that yes, you may be struggling with something right now, yes, you may be
Mm-hmm.
suffering with something right now, but God, as
But
you
God. Mm-hmm.
go to him and know that he truly and undeniably has the answer for your cure.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
he is truly the foundation and the basis for everything.
Exactly. I just
So with
can
this,
I oh wait before
yes,
you
Nick,
I,
go
I
ahead.
just
What do
want
you
to
want?
I just wanted to plug into something and then I'll let you close. One of the things that I pay attention to when you're in the infusion center, every infusion center is different. But one of the experiences that I paid close attention to was the attitude as you were talking about those that are in the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was this elderly gentleman, and every time I would go, he would always complain. It's too cold, it's too hot. He didn't want to sit there, this, that, the other. Always complain. And I asked one of the nurses, the nurse that was attending to me, and she kind of rolled her eyes. She said, "Oh, he always complains every time he comes in." It's like, and she turned around. She said, "But I'm so grateful for you, Mrs. Anderson, because you always have this wonderful disposition." And I took that to heart because I had made it in my mind that, you know what, it's something that happened I'm in the midst of it, but I choose not to allow myself to dwell in it. And I
Mm-hmm.
remembered a good friend of mine used to say, um, I had a friend, not a good friend. I had someone who told me this one time that a pity party is reserved for one person and one person alone, and that's the person hosting it. And I didn't want to host my own pity party and be the only one there and complain and whine about what I was going through. And so, like you said, what we speak to ourselves is really important. And I just really, I don't, I don't know how else to stress to your listeners that yes, go through your moments and have your emotions, and that's okay and that's fine. But don't wallow. Don't allow yourself to reserve an RSVP to your own pity party and
Mm-hmm.
stay there. Pop the balloons, tear up the invitation, cancel the party, and move forward.
I like that. I like that. I like that. And we're going to leave it right there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say thank you, Nick. I'm going to say, Lord, we thank you and we praise you for this time spent. I ask, Lord, that this will open the eyes and the ears and the hearts of the listeners. Thank you again for taking the time to listen to Black Girl Joy. Please remember to like and share our podcast and join our Facebook page on Black Girl Joy LLC. Remember to embrace the journey. Bye.